Hey guys, this is Caleb from the Command Valley podcast coming at you with another Commander deck tech, or decksplaination as I like to call them. Here on the Command Valley podcast, we talk about all things Commander, provide you with deck techs to help you brew, gameplay videos, and so much more. Today, I'm going to be talking about the very first Commander deck I ever built, and it's led by none other than Mayael the Anima. She is by far my favorite commander of all time, and it's not just because she's crazy powerful, but because she also reminds me of when I started to really get into Magic in the Alara block. Alright, so Mayael costs 1 red, 1 green, and 1 white. She's a legendary creature, Elf Shaman, and she's a 2/3. And she's got this super cool ability that you can pay 3, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 white, then tap her, and then you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and then she says you may put a creature card with power 5 or greater from among them into play. Then you put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Alright, so the goal when playing Mayael is pretty clear. We want to pull huge and powerful creatures out of nowhere and crush our opponents with them. But we aren't really pulling them from nowhere, we're actually pulling them from the top 5 cards of our deck. So, for a strategy like this to work, we're going to want to have a deck full of huge creatures to guarantee a hit from Mayael as often as we can. Before I say anything else about how I built Mayael the Anima, here are some quick tips that I like to use whenever I build a deck. So when building a deck, I usually try to have between 37 and 40 lands, at least 10 cards that draw me more cards, 10 ramp cards, 4 to 5 target removal, and 3 to 5 board wipes. I'm only going to talk about a few cards from these categories during the deck tech, and also keep in mind that these are just jumping off points. It's all really up to you, the deck builder, to make it all your own. To help us with this strategy, we're going to play some cards that allow us to manipulate the top cards of our deck. Sylvan Library, Mary's Guile, Scroll Rack, and Sensei's Divining Top are all perfect for the job. Sylvan Library is an enchantment for 1 and a green, and it says, at the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life, or put the card on top of your library. So what this basically does is it allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose which one you want to draw for that turn, and then put the other 2 back on top of your deck. And if you want to keep 2 or all 3 of those cards, you can just pay a little extra life. Mary's Guile does almost the same thing as Sylvan Library, it just doesn't allow us to pay the additional 4 life for each card that we also want to draw. It says, during your upkeep, you may look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them back in any order. Scroll Rack is an artifact for 2 mana that says pay 1 and tap it, then exile any number of cards from your hand face down. Put that many cards from the top of your library into your hand, then look at the exiled cards and put them on top of your library in any order. So Scroll Rack is great because, like I said, we're going to fill this deck with a ton of fatties, and most fatties are going to have a really high converted mana cost. So during the beginning of the game and early stages of the game, we're not going to want to have these huge 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drops in our hands. And so Scroll Rack is a great way for us to kind of put those back on top of our deck, be able to play maybe some cheaper cards from the top of our library, then get Mayael out, and then get those cards that were in our hand out with Mayael. Then Sensei's Divining Top is 1 for an artifact that says pay 1, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. You can also tap it to draw a card, then put Sensei's Divining Top on top of its owner's library. So the thing that we are really trying to do with Sylvan Library, Mary's Guile, and Sensei's Divining Top is rearrange the top cards of our library so that we're drawing what we want, as well as being able to hit what we want with Mayael. Unfortunately, these cards cost a little bit more than they did when I first started playing Commander, so if you're just starting out and don't want to spend $200 on just 4 cards, then I recommend getting Mary's Guile and Sensei's Divining Top first. You can always add the other 2 when it's a little more convenient, and if budget is not a problem, then definitely grab all 4 of these. Two more cards that can be considered part of this category but fall more under the tutor category are Sylvan Tutor and Worldly Tutor. Essentially, the only difference between these two cards is that Worldly Tutor is an instant and Sylvan Tutor is a sorcery, but they both allow you to do the same thing. You search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and then you shuffle your library and put that creature on top of your library. So this is perfect when you're set up with Mayael and you've got just enough mana to use one of the tutors, grab a huge creature, put it on top, and then activate Mayael. Even though activating Mayael's ability to get out huge, nasty, powerful creatures is the main strategy of the deck, it never hurts to have a little bit of redundancy. Some extra cheat cards that we can run are Elvish Piper, Quicksilver Amulet, Champion of Ronus, Pattern of Rebirth, and Defense of the Heart. Elvish Piper is a 1/1 creature for 3 and a green, but she says, pay 1 green and tap her, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. So if we've got one of those huge fatties that we're trying to get out with Mayael sitting in our hand where we don't want it, Elvish Piper is the perfect way to pull it out of our hand and put it onto the battlefield. Same goes for Quicksilver Amulet. That is a 4-drop artifact that says pay 4 and tap it, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Champion of Ronus works pretty much the same way, but he has to attack first and be exerted. He says, you may exert Champion of Ronus as it attacks. When you do, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Pattern of Rebirth is an aura that says enchant creature. When enchanted creature dies, that creature's controller may search their library for a creature card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. So my favorite thing to do with this is to put it on Mayael, because everybody knows that she's going to go super crazy if they just leave her on the battlefield. But if we make it so that when she dies, we can go grab, say, Avacyn or Kozilek, they might be a little bit less likely to kill her. Defense of the Heart is an enchantment for 3 and a green, and it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls 3 or more creatures, sacrifice Defense of the Heart, search your library for up to 2 creature cards, and put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I was a little bit iffy about including Defense of the Heart in my deck, so I started to test it, and I've had some surprisingly good results, especially when I've also gotten Forbidden Orchard, which allows me to give my opponents a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token anytime that I tap it for mana. These cards are all great ways to achieve our goal of cheating out fatties, and are often actually even easier to use than Mayael. Because we're going to be trying to drop creatures like crazy, not to mention at instant speed with Mayael and a couple of our other cheat cards, having some cards that benefit from ETB or enter the battlefield abilities is awesome. Enchantments like Guardian Project, which allows us to draw a card anytime we get a creature onto the battlefield, and Aura Shards, which allows us to destroy an artifact or enchantment each time we get a creature, are so good. And then we have Cream of the Crop, which could also go in our manipulating the top of our deck category. It's an enchantment for 1 and a green, and it says, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's power. If you do, put one of those cards on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is crazy good with cards like Avacyn Angel of Hope, who comes in and allows you to look at the top 8 cards of your deck, then put one of those cards on top of your deck, especially when it's teamed up with one of my favorite enchantments in the deck, Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators is an enchantment for 4 and 2 green that says, whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may put that card on the bottom of your library. So when we've got both Cream of the Crop and Lurking Predators out, anytime one of our opponents casts a spell, we create kind of this chain where we play the top card of our deck, if it's a creature, and then we get to fix the top card of our deck, and then when another opponent plays a spell, we do it all over again. Cream of the Crop and Lurking Predators together is absolutely ridiculous. Though these are all enchantments that don't really do anything when they first come into play, they can be really useful when you need them. I especially recommend playing Guardian Project. I've absolutely loved this newer card every time I have played it. even though the theme of this deck is to kind of cheat out these big, huge creatures, we're having to work really hard to get what we want. So one of the things that we need to make sure we're doing in this deck is protecting our stuff. We especially want to be able to protect our commander with cards like Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, but then we can also protect all of our creatures with cards like Asceticism and Privileged Position. Asceticism is an enchantment for 3 and 2 green that says, creatures you control can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. And then it also has, pay 1 and a green, regenerate target creature. So it gives us even more insurance that we're going to keep our creatures like Mayael and our big huge fatties that we're getting with her on the field no matter what. And then we've got Privileged Position, that is an enchantment for 2 and 3 hybrid green and white. It says other permanents you control can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. Giving our whole team hexproof with Asceticism and Privileged Position is a great way to protect them. Okay, so the moment you've all been waiting for. What are we going to cheat in with this deck? Some really obvious choices that you can include in your deck that I really enjoy playing in mine are Avacyn, Angel of Hope, Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, World Spine Worm, Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, Wormcoil Engine. These are all really awesome, really fun cards to play and are definitely going to provide you with a lot of fun stories to tell afterward. But I also wanted to go into depth a little bit more on some maybe not so obvious cards to include, such as Blazing Archon, Surok the Hunt Caller, Xanagos, God of Revels, Vigor, and Stonehoof Chieftain. Blazing Archon is a 5/6 flyer that just says, creatures can't attack you. I can't tell you how many times this creature has saved my life just being out there on the field, stopping my opponents from taking me out. Surok the Hunt Caller is really good in this deck because most of our creatures with power 5 or more are really high drops, but he's only a 4-drop, and he's got a really good ability. It's a formidable ability, and it says, at the beginning of your combat on your turn, if creatures you control have total power 8 or greater, target creature you control gains haste until end of turn. This card is absolutely amazing in this deck. What it means is, if we drop a creature card with Mayael and we want to attack with it this turn, we most likely can, because he's already providing 5 out of the 8 power required to get his ability going. Another really great card that we can use to give our creatures haste and an added bonus is Xanagos, God of Revels. There's a lot on Xanagos, but the most important part on him is the very last ability, which says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and gets +X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So you've just dropped Avacyn on your turn, but you've also got Xanagos on the field. Avacyn is now a 16/16 with flying and haste and vigilance. Vigor is also another crazy creature that I've included in this deck that could also go in the protect our stuff category. He is a 6/6 for 3 and 3 green. He's got trample, and he says, if damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage. Put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. And then, when he's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle him into his owner's library. So basically, he makes it so that all of your creatures can't be killed by damage, so you can just swing in as much as you want, or you can block as much as you want, and you don't have to worry about your creatures dying. And if Vigor is ever put into the graveyard, he gets shuffled right back into your deck for Mayael to bring out. Stonehoof Chieftain is an 8/8 with trample and indestructible, but the funnest part about him is that he says, whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. Stonehoof Chieftain is just like Vigor in the sense that he makes it so that our creatures can swing in and we don't have to worry about them dying, and he can also give them trample. And now I'd like to talk about 3 of my favorite cards in the deck. Siege Behemoth is awesome because of his second ability, which says, as long as he is attacking, for each creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. In other words, just like with Stonehoof Chieftain and Vigor, we can swing in and not worry about where our damage is going, but in a little bit different way this time, it all sort of tramples over. Bloomtender might not look like much, it's just a 1/1 little elf druid for 1 and a green, but its ability is tap, and then for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color to your mana pool. So if we've already played Mayael, that means we have access to at least 3 mana. If we also have Bloom Tender out on the field, it now taps for red, green, and white, which basically turns Mayael's ability on instantly. If I've ever got Worldly Tutor, Sylvan Tutor, or Green Sun Zenith early in the game, the card I'm always going to grab is Bloom Tender. Last but definitely not least is Seedborn Muse. Seedborn Muse makes this deck go absolutely nuts. She's a 2/4 for 3 and 2 green, and she says, untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. So I'm sure you already know what that means. We are activating Mayael's ability at the end of every person's turn or at the time that is most convenient on every player's turn. Seedborn Muse is absolutely vital to this deck. She's amazing. Mayael the Anima makes for some super fun and unexpected games. You will definitely have some stories to tell if you choose to play Mayael. Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching or listening to this decksplaination. Be sure to like and subscribe and drop us a comment below telling us what you would play in a Mayael deck or anything cool that you think that I missed. Also, don't forget to check out our other deck techs and the complete deck list in the show notes. Thanks guys, girls, and goats.